Chevrolet built a vehicle so conceptually perfect that the automotive industry has spent 37 years trying to replace it and failed every single time. Half car, half truck, all attitude. The El Camino didn't fit a category, it created one. And the story of how it was born, how it dominated American roads for nearly 3 decades, and how General Motors killed one of the most beloved vehicles in automotive history is one of the greatest miscalculations in the industry's history. This is the full story. But if you think those 2026 leaks you've been seeing are real, you're being lied to. To understand why it's never coming back, you have to see how it was actually killed. Part 1. Ford threw the first punch. 1957. America is in love with chrome, fins, and horsepower. The post-war boom is running hot, and Ford, always watching, always calculating, spots a gap in the market that nobody else had the nerve to fill. They called it the Ranchero. A car-based pickup, a coupe utility. Built on a full-size station wagon platform, it gave American buyers something that had never existed in the domestic market, the comfort of a passenger car with the utility of a work truck. Ford moved 21,695 units in its first year. The automotive press didn't know what to make of it. Consumers did. They bought it. GM watched, and GM does not like to lose. On October 16, 1958, Chevrolet pulled the curtain back on the 1959 El Camino. Built on the Brookwood station wagon's B-body platform, it wore the same swooping tail fins and panoramic rear glass that defined late 50s Chevrolet design. It was unmistakably American, unmistakably bold, and it hit showroom floors ready to fight. The market responded immediately. 1959 El Camino production hit 22,266 units. The Ranchero was beaten in its own segment in its third year. Chevrolet had not only answered Ford, it had won the opening round. Then, everything went wrong. 1960 sales collapsed to 14,163 units. The causes weren't external, they were internal. GM's own Corvair compact was pulling buyers in a different direction. The American market was fragmenting. Full-size utility was falling out of fashion as compact cars surged, and rather than adapt, GM made the most corporate decision possible. They canceled it. After just 2 model years, the El Camino was gone. Killed not by competitors, not by consumers, by the same company that built it. It would sit in hibernation for 4 years, but that hibernation was about to end in no way nobody expected. Part 2. The comeback that changed everything. 1964. The American auto industry is rewriting its own rules. The muscle car era is igniting. The baby boomers are getting driver's licenses, and Chevrolet, recognizing what it threw away, makes a decision that reshapes the El Camino's entire identity. The new El Camino rides on the A-body Chevelle platform, mid-sized, lighter, more agile than its predecessor. And instead of positioning it as a work truck with a car body, Chevrolet markets it differently, as a gentleman's pickup, a vehicle for the man who needed to haul on Saturday but wanted to look sharp doing it. First-year production, 32,548 units. The market spoke instantly and without any ambiguity. The mid-size concept was correct. The El Camino wasn't a compromise, it was the answer to a question American buyers didn't even know they were asking. From 1964 through 1967, the El Camino built momentum. Each model year refined the formula. Each year the sales climbed. The foundation was solid, the platform was proven, and Chevrolet was about to pour rocket fuel on all of it.
Part 3. The era when it became a legend. 1968 to 1972. These 4 years are why enthusiasts still tear up talking about the El Camino. This is the period that forged the legend. The SS package, Super Sport, arrived for 1968. It gave buyers what no truck could give them and what few cars could match, a performance package on a vehicle that could still haul a load. Heavy-duty suspension, sport striping, blacked-out grills, and under the hood, a menu of big block V8 engines that made the whole concept borderline irresponsible in the best possible way. Then came 1970. Chevrolet dropped the LS6 454 cubic inch V8 into the El Camino SS. The factory rating, 450 horsepower and 500 pound-feet of torque. Those numbers were almost certainly conservative. GM was already playing the insurance game, deliberately understating output to keep premium rates manageable for buyers. In practice, the LS6-equipped El Camino was one of the fastest vehicles on American roads. Full stop. 450 horsepower in a vehicle with a cargo bed in 1970. Let that land. This was not a truck that happened to go fast. This was a weapon with a bed bolted to the back. In 1971, GM recognized what it had and extended the concept to its sister brand. The GMC Sprint arrived as a badge-engineered twin. Two brands, one unstoppable platform. 1972 production reached 57,147 units, the highest volume the third generation would ever see. The El Camino was no longer proving itself. It had proven itself. It was a permanent fixture of American automotive culture, and nothing on the horizon suggested that was going to change. The horizon was lying. Part 4. The world changes, and the El Camino doesn't. October 1973. OPEC cuts oil production. Gas lines stretch around city blocks. Americans who had spent a decade buying the biggest, most powerful vehicles Detroit could produce are suddenly staring at fuel gauges with a new kind of anxiety. The timing could not have been worse for a vehicle built around big block V8 power. Federal emissions regulations were already tightening. The Clean Air Act of 1970 had set the clock running, and by 1972, the industry was adding smog equipment that was strangling horsepower numbers across every model line. The LS6's 450 horsepower? Gone. By 1973, the landscape was so different that the same basic engine in a detuned, low-compression, emissions-compliant configuration was a shadow of what it had been 3 years earlier. And yet, 1973 was the El Camino's all-time best sales year, 64,987 units. The buying public, despite the fuel crisis, despite the regulatory squeeze, still wanted it. The market was telling GM something critical. This vehicle has a loyal, passionate base that will absorb adversity. Work with us. The problem is what came next. The colonnade styling of 1973 made the El Camino the largest it would ever be. At a moment when the entire industry was being forced toward efficiency, the El Camino was at peak size, peak weight, and diminishing peak power. The combination was unsustainable. Sales throughout the mid-70s declined steadily, not catastrophically. The El Camino still moved significant volume, but the trajectory was wrong, and everyone in Detroit could see it.
Part 5. The beginning of the end. 1978. GM downsizes the El Camino onto the G-body platform, shared with the Monte Carlo and Malibu. Smaller, lighter, more fuel-efficient. On paper, the right response to the era. The problem was execution. The El Camino of the late 70s and early 80s was a diminished thing. The engine options that made the SS package legendary were gone or gutted. The 267 cubic inch V8, a tepid 120 horsepower, became a standard offering. The vehicle that once ran 450 horsepower from the factory was now offering less than a quarter of that. The vehicle that once sat in a garage next to muscle cars was now sitting in a market segment being redefined by Japanese compact trucks. Toyota, Datsun, they were offering something GM never had to seriously defend against before: inexpensive, fuel-efficient, reliable small pickups. The American buyer who needed genuine utility was shopping differently.
Then in 1982, Chevrolet introduced the S10, a compact pickup, built for the new market reality, affordable, maneuverable, efficient, aimed squarely at the buyers who would once have considered the El Camino. It worked, and it cannibalized the El Camino's remaining customer base with surgical precision. By 1985, production had shifted from the United States to Ramos Arizpe, Mexico. The symbolic weight of that move was not lost on buyers who'd followed the nameplate for decades. The numbers reflected it. 1987, final production year. 13,473 units, the lowest total in the El Camino's history, lower than the second year that got it canceled the first time. In December 1987, the last El Camino rolled off the line. The factory retooled for the GMT 400 full-size truck program. The nameplate was officially retired. No send-off, no commemorative final edition, just silence. Part 6. Every attempt to bring it back has failed, and why those leaks are fake. The automotive industry cannot stop trying to revive what it killed, and in 2026, that desperation has moved from concept cars to content farms. Before the history, the facts. Those renders flooding your feed right now, the sleek, modern El Caminos with Camaro fascias, aggressive proportions, and 2026 official reveal thumbnails, they are AI-generated fan art. Not a single one originates from a GM design studio. Not one has been confirmed by a credible automotive source. They exist because RenderBait performs algorithmically, not because a new El Camino is coming. Here's why you know that with certainty. GM currently does not produce a rear-wheel drive unibody platform that could underpin a true El Camino successor. The architecture doesn't exist. Without that platform, there is no El Camino. The renders are selling you a fantasy built on a foundation that isn't there. Now, how did we get to a place where the only El Caminos being revealed are generated by artificial intelligence? 1992. GM shows a Lumina-based El Camino concept, never reaches production. 1995, a Caprice-based concept gets identical treatment. Applause at the auto show, nothing in showrooms. 1993, Pontiac announces the G8 ST sport truck, built on the same rear-wheel drive Australian platform as the G8 sedan, V8 powered, manual transmission available. The automotive press loses its mind. This was it. The spiritual successor had finally arrived.
Then GM filed for bankruptcy. The federal bailout required brand eliminations. Pontiac was on the list. The G8 ST was 90% developed when the plug was pulled. A fully functional prototype exists. You can find photos of it. It is one of the most painful near misses in modern automotive history. A vehicle that was weeks from production approval, erased by a spreadsheet. That is the last time a true El Camino successor came close. Everything since has been concepts that died in committee, renders that were never real, and headlines written to capture search traffic. The El Camino does not exist in any showroom on Earth, and the content telling you otherwise is lying to get your click. The real reason this matters. The El Camino was killed by a combination of forces that had nothing to do with whether consumers wanted it. Regulatory pressure, internal brand competition, a fuel crisis that reshaped the entire industry, and the slow, institutional abandonment of a vehicle that didn't fit neatly into a category. But here's what those boardroom decisions missed, what GM never fully understood about what it had built. The El Camino wasn't a product, it was a personality. The person who bought one wasn't choosing between a car and a truck. They were choosing identity. They were choosing to be the person who didn't accept that those two things were mutually exclusive. The El Camino told the world, I can do both, and I'll look better doing it than you do doing either. That person still exists, in massive numbers. The evidence is sitting in garages across America, meticulously restored SS models, frame-off restorations, big block swaps, custom builds commanding five-figure price tags. A vehicle discontinued in 1987 still generates genuine passion and serious money nearly 4 decades later.
What General Motors built between 1959 and 1987, imperfectly, inconsistently, sometimes brilliantly, was one of the most distinctly American vehicles ever conceived. A vehicle that understood that practicality and performance weren't enemies, that a working vehicle could also be a driver's vehicle, that a truck didn't have to apologize for wanting to be fast. The El Camino never apologized for anything, and Detroit has been apologizing for killing it ever since.